The fog moved across the Northridge Hills the way it always had. Slow, heavy, the kind of fog that remembered things. Below it, a stone manor stood alone above the valley. The windows were dark. The doors were closed. The house had learned, over many years, how to keep its secrets. High in the west wing, behind a pane of glass that had not been opened in 7 years, a woman stood watching. She watched the eastern road every morning. Nothing ever came down that road. Until the fog thinned. A carriage. Dark horses. No crest on the door. The kind of carriage that belonged to a man who did not need to announce himself. He stepped out into the gray light. Plain cloak. Dusty boots. No traveling hat, which meant something in a kingdom where men of rank always wore one. He stood very still, and then, as if he could feel the weight of someone watching, he looked up. His eyes found the west wing window. His eyes found her. The fog came down off the Northridge Hills the way it always did in October. Slow, heavy, like a secret that didn't want to leave, Ashford Manor sat above the valley. Stone walls, dark windows, a house that had learned how to keep things hidden. And in the west wing, behind glass that hadn't been opened. In 7 years, a woman stood watching. Her name was Isolde Ashford. She was 20 years old. She had been standing at that window since she was 13. Not every minute, not every day, but long enough that the wood of the sill had worn smooth under her hands. Long enough that the small chip in the corner of the glass had become something she greeted in the morning. Like an old friend. The only one she had. The morning was gray. The sky was lower than usual, and somewhere far below the hill, a thin road wound east through the trees. She watched that road every day, because nothing ever came down that road. Until today. A carriage moved through the mist. 2 riders in front, 1 behind. The horses were dark and well kept, the kind of horses that belonged to someone who did not need to announce himself. There was no crest on the carriage door. Isolde leaned closer to the glass. She had learned, over 7 years, how to read people from a distance. The way a man held his shoulders, the way he placed his feet when he stopped, the way he looked up at a building before going inside. Those things told her more than any introduction. The carriage stopped at the eastern gate. A man stepped out. He was tall. He was not wearing a traveling hat, which was strange, because men of a certain rank always wore one when arriving at another lord's estate. It was part of the performance. The little ritual of power. This man wore none. His cloak was plain. His boots were dusty. His face was calm in a way that made the calm feel like the first layer of something deeper. He stood for a long moment in the gray morning light. And then, as if he had felt the weight of her looking, he turned. He looked up. His eyes found the west wing window. His eyes found her. Isolde stepped back so fast she knocked the small table behind her. A book fell. The sound was small, but in the silence of 7 years, it was thunder. She pressed her back against the wall. Her heart was doing something it had not done in a long time, beating like it remembered how. She closed her eyes. She had been seen, not the way the servants saw her. They looked through her. Like she was a piece of furniture they were paid to dust, not the way her mother saw her. Her mother looked at her with grief shaped into something tidy, like a wound bandaged too tightly to ever heal. This man had looked at her, and she did not know yet what that meant. But she knew it meant something. Downstairs, the manor began to move. She could hear it. The shift in the air, the hurry of feet on the lower hall. Her mother's voice, warm and careful, in the way it only became when someone important arrived. Doors being opened wider than usual. Polished doors. Front doors. The kind that announced the house to the world. Isolde stayed where she was. She had learned how to be still. There is a particular kind of power in a person who has learned to be still without becoming passive. She had not understood that at 13. She understood it now. She bent down and picked up the fallen book. It was a thin volume on pack inheritance law. She had read it 6 times. She placed it back on the table with steady hands. Then she walked slowly back to the window. The man was gone. The carriage was being led to the stables. But she did not move from the glass because something inside her had shifted, and she did not yet know what it was. Or whether it was safe. She had not always lived in silence. There was a version of her, somewhere in her memory, that used to slip out before dawn and walk the lower grounds in bare feet. Hair undone, laughter loud enough to make her mother flinch. That girl had existed. Isolde was almost most certain of it, but certainty is a fragile thing. When you spend 7 years being told the world outside your door is dangerous, and that your face is the reason why. The story began at 13. There had been a gathering at the manor, a formal one. Her father was alive then, Lord Edmund Ashford, a quiet man, a kind one, the kind of man who read poetry in the evening and did not raise his voice when he was angry. Among the guests was a man called Lord Reginald Vane. He was 58. He had a reputation she was too young to fully understand. But she understood enough. He looked at her the way a man looks at a horse he intends to buy. Her mother noticed. Her father pretended not to. 3 days later, Isolde was moved to the West Wing. A temporary arrangement, her mother said, just until certain matters settled. The matters never settled, because the following winter, her father was dead. They said it was his heart. He had collapsed in the library, his hand still curled around a letter no one was allowed to see. The letter disappeared before the funeral. Isolde had asked about it once. Her mother had gone pale and changed the subject. She had not asked again. After that, Oren took over the estate. Her brother, 24 years old then, 31 now, tall like their father, but missing the thing inside their father that made tallness feel like protection instead of distance. Oren came to the West Wing twice in the first year, then once, then never. Her mother came twice a week, always composed, always dressed as if she had somewhere important to be. The servants brought meals, books, if she asked, letters if anyone wrote to her. No one wrote to her, except Hetty. Hetty Marlowe was a seamstress in the village at the bottom of the hill. She was 68 years old. She had silver hair and hands that had stitched wedding dresses for 2 generations of Ashford women. She had also stitched the small mourning dress Isolde wore at her father's funeral. Hetty remembered her. Hetty wrote to her, not openly. The letters came folded inside parcels of fabric, smuggled by a housemaid named Wren, who was 35 and quiet, and had her own reasons for helping. Wren had lost a younger sister once, to something, to someone. She never said what, but she handled Isolde's letters the way you handle the last living member of a family. Through Hetty, Isolde stayed tethered to the world. She learned what was happening in the village, what the weather was doing on the lower roads, which baby had been born, which old man had died. Small things, the texture of an ordinary life, the kind of life that had been taken from her without her ever being told why. But Hetty did more than write letters. She sent seeds, fabric scraps, pressed flowers. Once an entire envelope of pine needles, because Isolde had mentioned 3 letters earlier that she had forgotten how a forest smelled. Isolde pressed those pine needles to her face and cried for an hour. The garden grew on her windowsill. 6 clay pots, roses mostly. Small ones, wild ones. The kind that did not need much. She had become extraordinarily good at making small things bloom in cold places. She had also become something else. She had read every book the servants would bring her. Pack history, territorial law, medical texts, the accounts of border healers, the records of formal pack disputes going back 3 generations. She had memorized clauses she would never need. She had built theories about the kingdom. From the single window of a single room. She was not broken. That was the thing they had miscalculated. 7 years of silence had not made her smaller. It had made her precise. The voices came up the stairs an hour later. She heard her mother first, Beatrice Ashford, 55 years old, a woman who had once been beautiful in a soft and easy way and had since trained that beauty into something tighter. More controlled, more armor than warmth. Her mother was talking the way she talked when she was trying to manage a situation that was no longer hers to manage. That wing of the house is not in use, Your Grace. The corridor is closed for repairs. If you'd allow me to show you the eastern parlor instead. The fires have been lit and the tea is. A man's voice cut her off, low, even, unhurried. I saw someone at the window this morning. There was a pause. Isolde stood 3 feet from her door, hands flat against the wall behind her. Breathing slow, the West Wing is private, her mother said. Her voice was tight now, the first thread of strain. I'm sure it is, the man said. Another pause. He had not asked. He had stated. There was a difference. And Isolde, who had spent 7 years learning the difference between asked and stated, felt that difference move through her like a small electric current. She heard footsteps. 2 sets, one slower than the other. Coming up the West Wing stair. That stair was never used. The footsteps stopped outside her door. There was a pause, a long one. Then the handle turned, the door opened. Her mother made a sound. Small, controlled. The closest she ever came to panic, and then she went very quiet. Alpha King Caspian Holloway stood in the doorway. He was taller than she had judged from the window. His eyes were a dark steel gray. They moved across the room in 3 seconds. Quickly, professionally. The way a man looked at a space when he was assessing it, not admiring it. He took in the bed, the single chair, the stacks of books on every available surface, the 6 clay pots on the windowsill, the worn rug, the chip in the glass. His eyes came back to her and stayed. Isolde did not move. She had decided, in the 3 seconds between hearing the handle turn and the door swinging open, that she would not flinch. 7 years of careful erasure had not taken that from her. Whatever else she was not someone who flinched. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, quietly, how long? It was not a question directed at her. He turned slightly toward her mother, who had gone perfectly still in the corridor behind him. Beatrice did not answer. How long has she been in this wing? He said again. This time, the quietness of his voice had something beneath it. Not anger, exactly. The particular weight of a man choosing very deliberately not to raise his voice, because raising it would be the lesser form of what he actually felt. Beatrice began to speak. Something measured. Something reasonable. Delicate health. A difficult time. A temporary arrangement that had simply extended itself out of care. He listened. But he was also watching Isolde as he listened. When her mother finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Leave us, Your Grace. I must insist on staying. My daughter is not well. She becomes anxious in the presence of... I was not asking, he said. The silence that followed was absolute. Isolde heard her mother's footsteps retreat down the corridor. Each one careful. Deliberate, the sound faded. And then it was only the 2 of them. He did not move closer. She appreciated that. You are not unwell, he said. No, she said. It was the first word she had spoken aloud to anyone outside her household in longer than she could clearly remember. Her voice surprised her. It was steadier than she had expected. He nodded slowly. My name is Caspian Holloway, he said. I came here on pack business with your brother. That business is now secondary. Secondary to what? She said. He met her eyes. That depends, he said, on what you are willing to tell me. She studied him. She had become extraordinarily good, over 7 years, at reading what a person was not saying, and what she saw in him was something she had not expected. He was not here to rescue her. He was here to listen. She walked, slowly, to the small chest beside her bed. She opened the lower drawer, the one she had never let the servants touch. Inside, beneath a folded square of cloth, were the documents she had been collecting for 3 years. Estate accounts, correspondence left carelessly in rooms she was not supposed to enter. Figures that did not match. Arrangements described in language careful enough to suggest the writer knew the words would not survive scrutiny. She lifted them out. She walked back across the room. She held them out to him. He took the papers. He read. She watched him move through them. His eyes were precise, steady. He did not skim. He read every line. When he reached the third page, she saw the small change in his posture. He had found it. He looked up at her. "You weren't waiting to be saved," he said. "You were waiting for someone to believe you." She did not answer, but something behind her ribs cracked, just a small crack, the kind that lets light through for the first time. He set the documents on the table. "Your brother has been negotiating a territorial arrangement with the Crown for the past 4 months," he said. The terms he offered involved certain assurances about the estate's stability. "And its assets?" She stood very still. "I am an asset," she said. He did not look away. "You were listed as a dependent," he said. "Not by name." The paperwork described the household as containing one surviving sibling, female, unmarried. "In poor health." He paused. "I began to suspect the paperwork was not accurate." She turned and walked to the window. The eastern path was empty now. The mist had thinned. Thin gold light was beginning to press through the cloud. She had survived 7 years in this room on the understanding that the people who kept her here were, at the very least, afraid for her. Learning that fear had never been the primary motivation reorganized something fundamental inside her. "What will you do?" she said quietly. "That depends," he said, "on what you want." She turned to look at him. It was a strange thing, being asked that question. No one had asked her what she wanted in so long that the question itself felt almost foreign, like a word in a language she used to speak and had nearly forgotten. "I want to leave this room," she said. He nodded. "I want my brother to answer for what he has done." He nodded again. "And I want to do it in a way that does not simply trade one form of control for another." Something in his face shifted. "Then we are aligned," he said. She studied him. "Why does it matter to you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My mother." She waited. "My mother was kept in a tower at the northern edge of the royal estate. She was called delicate. She was called fragile. She died when I was 8. I was not permitted at the funeral." He did not say it with drama. He said it the way a man speaks who has made a long and difficult peace with a wound and now uses that peace as a kind of compass. "My father," she said quietly. "They said it was his heart. You don't believe that." "I have never believed that." Downstairs, a door opened. Footsteps moved across the floor below. More than one person. Purposeful. Isolde went very still. She knew that step. She had memorized it over 7 years. Orance was home. "He's back early," she said. Someone sent for him. She turned and walked to the window again. Not to look out. To gather herself. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the cold sill. She breathed. She thought about Hetty, about the pine needles, about the small wild roses that had agreed, against every reason, to bloom on a windowsill in the cold. When she turned around, her hands were still. "There is something else," she said. He waited. "My father left something. Before he died. My mother brought me a Bible last night. It belonged to him." She walked to the small bedside chest. The Bible was on top. Leather worn soft at the edges. She opened it. She turned to the back. To the place where the binding was slightly thicker. Slightly heavier than it should have been. There, folded between the final pages of the Book of Ruth, a letter. Her father's hand. She unfolded it slowly. The paper crackled. She read it twice. Then she looked at Caspian. Her face had changed. "There is a second will," she said. "He wrote it the week before he died. It is hidden in the library. Inside a book called Unpack Law and Inheritance." She looked up. "He says I am the rightful heir to Ashford Manor, not Orrin." The silence in the room was a living thing. "He knew," she said. "He knew he was going to be killed. He wrote this 3 days before he died." The footsteps below were coming closer. Heading for the stairs. He looked at her. "Will you come with me to the library?" It was the first invitation she had received in 7 years. She closed the Bible gently. She placed it back on the chest. She walked to the door. She paused at the threshold. 7 years. 7 years of standing on one side of a closed door. She put her hand on the frame. She stepped through. The hallway smelled different than she remembered. Older, wood polish and dust, and something faintly green from the conservatory tupelo floors below. Caspian walked beside her, not in front of her, not behind her. Beside. The late afternoon light came through the long corridor window in gold bars. She passed through one, then another, then another. Her own shadow moved on the floor in front of her. She had not seen her own shadow in 7 years. It looked tall. It looked like a person. The library was at the end of the western corridor. Heavy door, iron hinges, a room she had loved as a child and not entered since she was 12. Caspian opened the door. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Old paper, old leather, the faint sweetness of pipe tobacco that should have faded years ago, but somehow had not. It smelled like her father. She did not cry. She walked along the second shelf from the window. On Pack Law and Inheritance, brown leather, gold lettering. Third book from the left. She pulled it down. She opened it. The center pages had been hollowed out. A small rectangle of paper sat nested inside, the second will. She lifted it out with both hands. She unfolded it. She read. The will was clear. The will was witnessed. The will was dated 3 days before her father's death. In it, Edmund Ashford left Ashford Manor, its lands, its accounts, and its eastern parcels to his daughter Isolde, not to his son Oren. The reasoning was given in 2 short sentences. I do not trust my son to protect his sister. I do not trust him to protect this house. There was a second page. She turned to it, a list of names, 6 names. She did not recognize all of them, but she recognized the first one. Reginald Vane, the man who had looked at her at 13. And next to his name, in her father's handwriting, was a single word, threatened. Oren reached the top of the West Wing stair at a run. He stopped. The corridor was empty. The door to Isolde's room was open. He had not seen that door open in 7 years. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing hard. One hand on the banister, the other curled into a loose fist at his side. His coat was dusty from the road. His hair was damp at the temples. He had ridden hard from town. Someone had sent word. He turned in a slow circle. Looking for her, Isolde, he said. His voice came out wrong. Too thin, too high, Isolde, he said again. The empty room did not answer. He walked to the doorway. He looked in. The bed was made. The small chair was pushed under the table. The 6 clay pots on the windowsill were undisturbed. The books were stacked the way she always stacked them. Spines aligned, smallest on top. Everything was where it should be, except his sister. He pressed a hand to his mouth. Then he turned and walked back to the stair. Beatrice was waiting in the lower hall. She had aged 10 years since the morning. Where is she? He said. His mother did not answer. Mother. Where is she? Beatrice looked at him. For the first time in his life, his mother looked at him the way she would have looked at a stranger she did not particularly like. She is in the library, Beatrice said. With the Alpha King. Oren closed his eyes. In the library, Isolde sat in the deep leather chair by the window. It had been her father's chair. She had not sat in it since she was 12. The leather was cold under her hands. The cushion remembered the shape of a man who had been gone for 7 years and had still, somehow, been quietly fighting for her from the grave. The second will lay on the small table between her and Caspian. He's at the foot of the stair, Caspian said quietly. I know. Do you want me in the room when he comes in? Yes. But not where he can see you first. Caspian moved to the window alcove. The heavy velvet curtain fell behind him. She breathed. Footsteps approached the library door. Oren pushed it open. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her. He was afraid. But not of her. He was afraid of something behind her. Something that had not yet walked into the room. He stepped inside. He closed the door carefully behind him. Isolde, he said. His voice had softened. It had become the voice she remembered from childhood. The voice he had used when she scraped her knee. And he carried her to the kitchen for honey water. She had loved that voice once. She had stopped expecting to hear it again around her 9th month in the West Wing. "You should be resting," he said. "You are not strong enough to be down here. The stairs alone." "Sit down, Oren," she said. He stopped. She had not used his name in 7 years. He sat down. "How long have you been out of the wing?" he said. "Long enough. Mother said the Alpha King. Mother said many things, Oren. Some of them were true." He flinched. She watched the flinch carefully. There was no satisfaction in it. What she felt now was something closer to the specific grief of finally seeing a person clearly. The grief of knowing them all the way to the bottom. And finding the bottom is just a man. Just a frightened man. "Tell me what you know about Cassius Vane," she said. "Cassius is a family friend. He has been advising me since I—" "Stop," he stopped. "Oren, I am going to give you one chance. I am going to ask one question. I have been listening to this house for 7 years. I will know if you lie." He was very still. "Did you," she said, "that father wrote a second will?" The blood left his face. "No," he said. "I did not know there was a second one. I swear to you." She believed him. She slid the document across the table. He picked it up with shaking hands. He read. When he reached the last page, the list of names, he stopped breathing. She watched his eyes move to the first name. Reginald Vane. And to the word beside it. Threatened. He set the paper down. He put both hands flat on the table. His eyes were wet. "I did not know about this," he said. "I believe you. He told me. Cassius told me. He told me father had owed his father money, that the estate would be ruined if I did not honor certain arrangements. He said you were the price. He said you were the only piece of the estate worth enough to settle it. He said if you ever appeared in pack society, he would make sure you did not survive a season." Her hands were very cold. "And so you locked me up," she said. "I did not think of it as locking you up. What did you think of it as?" He was silent for a long moment. "I thought of it as the only thing I knew how to do." She closed her eyes. Because here was the truth she had circled for years without ever being allowed to land on. Her brother was not a monster. He was a coward. And cowardice, in a man who had been handed too much power at 24, had bent itself into the shape of cruelty without ever once requiring him to admit what it was. "How long has Cassius been in your accounts?" she said. 7 years. He approached father first, a year before. I did not know that then. How much does he hold? Most of it. How much is left? The eastern parcel. And the lower fields. Everything else is leveraged. She nodded slowly. She knew, almost to the figure, how much the manor had been worth 7 years ago. She knew how much had been bled away since. "Cassius is coming here," Oren said. "He is coming tomorrow. He has heard about the Alpha King. He is coming to assess what he calls the situation." "I know," she said. "I expected as much." He stared at her. "You expected him? I have been reading his letters to you, Oren, for 3 years. Ren brought them to me after you had filed them." His mouth opened. Then it closed. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just realized that the sister he believed he had spent 7 years protecting had, in fact, been doing all of his work while he slept. "You knew. All of it. Most of it." He put his face in his hands. "What do you want me to do?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to tell the Alpha King everything you know about Cassius Vane," she said. "Every letter, every meeting, every threat, every name. I want it on paper. I want it signed. I want it witnessed. That will ruin me, yes. They will take the manor. They will take the parts of it you have already sold to Cassius. The will father wrote restores the rest to me. I do not plan to take the manor from you. Not entirely. But I will not let you keep it as it is. You would let me stay. I would let you serve. What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "that you will be useful for the first time in your adult life, Oren. You will help me clean what you helped him dirty, and then we will see who you become." He was crying now, quietly, without theater. She did not move to comfort him. She had loved her brother once. She might love him again someday. Love, she had learned, was not a switch you turned back on. Love was a road, and the road back to her brother was a road they would both have to walk, one slow step at a time. But she was willing to leave the door open. That was enough, for now. The velvet curtain by the window moved. Caspian stepped out. Oren looked up. His face went white again. "Your Grace," he said. "Lord Ashford, you heard all of it." Oren nodded. He stood up slowly. "I will write the statement tonight," he said. "Tomorrow morning," Caspian said. "You will write it in the presence of 2 witnesses. One of mine, one of your sister's choosing. It will be sealed and lodged in the territorial register before Lord Vane sets foot in this house. Yes, Your Grace, and Oren. Yes, Your Grace, whatever happens tomorrow, you will be in this room when it happens. You will sit beside your sister. You will not speak unless she signals you to. You will not protect her. She does not need that from you. But you will witness. Yes." Oren moved toward the door. He paused. He turned back. "Isolde, yes. I am sorry. I know. It is not enough. It is not. But it is something." He left. The library door clicked shut behind him. Isolde sat very still for a moment. Then she put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She just breathed. She breathed the way you breathe when you have been holding something for so long that your body has forgotten what it feels like to set it down. After a while, she felt Caspian sit down across from her, not in her brother's chair, on the small bench beside her father's chair. He did not touch her. He just sat. When she lowered her hands, he was looking at the will. Not at her, giving her the privacy of her own face. "You did not flinch," he said quietly. "I have not flinched in a long time. I want to walk outside," Isolde said. "Now?" Now he stood. He held out a hand. She did not take it, not because she did not want to, because she wanted. The first time she walked out of this house in 7 years, to do it on her own legs. He understood. He let his hand fall. She stood. She walked to the door. She opened it herself. Outside, the gardens of Ashford Manor were not what she remembered. The lower terrace had gone wild. The hedges had grown unruly. A whole climbing rose had wrapped itself around the old iron sundial and turned it into something that looked less like a measuring tool and more like a small wild monument to time itself. She walked slowly. She did not speak. The grass under her thin slippers was cold and damp. She felt it through the fabric. She felt the unevenness of the ground. She felt the breath of October on her skin. She felt alive. She had forgotten what it was like to feel alive in this way. The full body of it, the cold air in her lungs, the faint smell of wood smoke from a distant chimney, the crunch of late leaves underfoot. Caspian walked behind her. 3 steps back, letting her have the garden. She walked all the way down to the lower hedge before her legs gave out. It was not dramatic. She did not collapse. She simply sat down on the low stone bench at the end of the path. Her hands began to shake. Her chest began to heave. She did not know if she was laughing or crying. She was doing both. Caspian sat down beside her, slowly, the way you sit beside a wild thing you do not want to startle. He did not touch her. He waited. After a long time, she said, "I had forgotten." "What had you forgotten?" "How big the sky is." He looked up. The October sky over the Northridge Hills was wide and bronze and turning toward dusk. A single hawk circled high up over the eastern field. "It is very big," he agreed. She laughed. It came out shaky, but it was a laugh. It was the first one in 7 years. She did not leave the garden until the sun set. She sat on that bench, and she watched the light go out of the sky. Caspian brought her a wool blanket from somewhere. He draped it around her shoulders and sat back down and watched the dusk with her. When the first star came out, she pointed at it. "That one was always my favorite," she said. "Why?" "Because it was the only one I could see from the west wing window in winter. The angle was wrong for the others. But that one came every night. From November to March, it would rise over the lower hedge at exactly the same hour. When the second star came out, she said, 'Your mother.' He was quiet. 'You said she was kept in a tower.' 'Yes. Why?' He looked at his hands. 'My father did not love her,' he said. He had married her for an alliance with the Western Pax. When my older brother was born, the alliance was secured. He no longer needed her to be visible, so she was made invisible. What was she like? He thought for a long time. She had a laugh, he said finally. I remember the laugh more than the face. The face fades, the laugh does not. She laughed like she was surprised by joy, as though she had not expected joy to find her, and was always a little delighted that it had. Isolde said nothing for a while. I am sorry, she said. It was a long time ago. That does not make it small. He looked at her. In the half-light of the dying day, the line of his jaw was softer than it had been that morning. His eyes were not steel anymore. They were something more like dusk itself. No, he said quietly. It does not. She did not look away. She had not looked at a person, really looked, in 7 years. The third star came out. He stood up. He held out a hand. This time, she took it. His hand was warm. She had forgotten that hands could be warm. The Alpha King did not sleep at Ashford Manor that night. He had a small camp set up by his guard 1/2 mile down the eastern road. He explained this to her at the door of the manor. He explained that he would return at dawn with 2 of his own people to witness Oren's statement and to be present when Cassius Vane arrived. He explained that she would not be alone in the house overnight, that his second-in-command, a woman named Captain Audra Finn, would stay inside the manor in the room next to Isolde's. She did not protest. She did not ask him to stay. She understood what he was doing. He was being respectful. He was a king. He was also a man who had learned, somewhere along the way, that there is a difference between rescue and respect, and that respect almost always required a slower hand. She liked him for it. She liked him in a way that was beginning to scare her. So she did not say what she might have said. She only said, "Thank you. Sleep, Isolde. I will try." He left. She watched him go from the front step. She turned and went back inside. Beatrice was waiting in the hall. For a long moment, the 2 women looked at each other across the polished wooden floor of the central foyer. Her mother's face was wrecked. The mask had gone. The composure that Beatrice had worn like armor for 30 years had simply fallen off in the corridor and broken into pieces too small to gather back up. Isolde, her mother said, "Mother, there are things you must hear from me, I know. Tonight?" Tonight. They went into the small parlor at the back of the house. It was the warmest room. The fire had been lit. A pot of tea had been set out on the low table by someone who did not know what else to do. They sat down across from each other. Her mother poured the tea with hands that did not quite work. Some of it spilled on the saucer. Neither of them said anything about it. "I have wanted to tell you this for many years," Beatrice said. "I have not no choice. Then tell me." Beatrice closed her eyes. "After your father died, Cassius Vane came to me, privately. Not to Oren. To me, he told me that he had been involved in your father's death. He did not say how. He did not need to. He said that if you were ever permitted to enter Pack society, if you were ever seen at a gathering, he would do to you what he had done to your father." Isolde's hands tightened around her teacup. He said, "The only way he would consider you safe was if you were kept out of sight, permanently. He said that as long as you were invisible, he would not act. And you believed him. I believed him. I believed him the way you believe a man who has just told you he killed someone you loved and is now telling you what he will do next. You did not tell Oren. Oren was 24. He was already breaking under what he was carrying. I did not trust him to keep the secret." Isolde looked at her mother. She saw, for the first time, what her mother had been carrying, not a tidy grief, not the controlled mourning of a widow who had moved on. A war. Her mother had been at war for 7 years. A war fought in silence. A war fought against a man she could not name, on behalf of a daughter she could not speak to. "I saved your breath," Beatrice said. "I thought I was saving your breath. I did not save your life. Your life is what I took. I did not know that was what I was doing until it was already done." She was crying, quickly, without theater. Isolde set down her teacup. She did not forgive her mother. She did not know if she ever would. But she stood up. She walked around the table. She sat down beside her mother on the small parlor sofa. She did not say anything. She just sat there. After a while, her mother's hand found hers. She let her mother hold it. That was all. That was, for tonight, enough. The next morning, the air at Ashford Manor was very still. The fog was thicker than it had been the day before. It pressed against the windows like a slow tide. The trees on the eastern slope were ghosts. Cassius Vane's carriage arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. It came up the eastern drive in slow procession. 4 black horses. 2 outriders. A carriage with the Vane crest in gold leaf on the door, polished so brightly it caught even the gray morning light. Cassius stepped out. He was 45. He was handsome in the cold, deliberate way of a man who had been told he was handsome since he was a boy and had built his entire life around the assumption. Dark hair. A jaw shaped like a verdict, eyes the color of river ice. He looked up at the manor. He was smiling. He had brought 3 armed men in addition to the carriage staff. Not enough to be a threat by themselves. Just enough to make a point. He believed he was walking into a house he already owned. Isolde let the curtain fall. She turned away from the window. Wren was there. Wren had pinned her hair. Wren had laced the back of her dress. A simple dark gray dress. No jewelry, no softness. The dress of a woman who had not come to be pleasant. Wren stepped back to look at her. "My lady?" "Yes, you look like your father." Isolde swallowed. She nodded. She walked down the stair. Caspian was already in the front hall. He was dressed plainly. No crown. No ceremonial coat. He looked up as she came down the stair. His face did something he did not quite control. It was, she realized later, the first time she had seen him look at her. Without preparing his face first, he recovered. She let him. She walked down the last few steps. She stopped beside him. The front doors swung open. Cassius Vane stepped into the hall. He saw Caspian first. "Your Grace," he said. "An unexpected pleasure, Lord Vane." Then Cassius's eyes moved past Caspian. They found Isolde for 3 seconds. His face was perfectly empty. He had not expected her. He had heard rumors. But he had not expected to see her standing in the front hall of Ashford Manor. In a clean dress, with her hair pinned, with the king at her shoulder, with her chin up. He recovered faster than most men would have, but he did not recover fast enough. She had seen the blank moment. She held his gaze. She did not smile. "Welcome back to my house, Lord Vane," she said. His jaw tightened. "Your house? My house." He stood now in the warm morning light of the central hall, his coat still on, his gloves still on, and the small dark thing behind his eyes was working very fast. He smiled. "My dear Isolde, what a remarkable recovery, thank you. Your mother had written that you were—" "My mother wrote what she was told to write, Lord Vane. We will not be discussing my mother." His smile held, but something in it tightened at the corners. He turned to Caspian. "Your Grace, I had heard you were in the area. I had not expected to find you here, on a matter so domestic, Lord Vane. I trust the territorial discussions are proceeding well." "They are not." "Oh? They are not proceeding at all. They have been dissolved." "On what grounds, may I ask?" "On the grounds that the man who proposed them does not, as it turns out, own most of what he was offering." The hall went very still. He laughed. It was a short, dry laugh. The laugh of a man surprised by an opening move he had not seen coming. "How interesting," he said. "And who has informed you of this, Your Grace?" "His sister." "His sister?" "Yes." Cassius turned his eyes back to Isolde. The small, dark thing behind them was no longer hidden. He was looking at her, now, the way his father had looked at her 7 years ago in this same hall, as a piece of property that had begun to make itself difficult. She did not look away. "Walk with me, Lord Vane," she said. "Excuse me?" "To the library. There is a document I would like you to read, my dear. Surely a matter of this delicacy is better discussed seated, with refreshments." "There will be no refreshments. There will be no sitting. There will be a document. And then there will be a decision. Yours." Walk with me, she turned. She did not wait to see if he followed. The library was warm. The fire had been built up high. The morning light came through the tall windows in pale rectangles and lay across the long table where, the night before, she had set out everything Cassius Vane was about to read. There were 3 documents on the table. The second will of Edmund Insford, signed and sealed statement from Orrin Ashford. Given that morning, witnessed by Captain Audra Finn and by Hetty Marlowe, who had walked up from the village at dawn, with her hair pinned and her best gray shawl around her shoulders, and her eyes the color of cold iron. And a third document, a territorial filing, drawn up overnight by the Alpha King's own clerk, lodged in the regional registry by carrier at first light, dissolving every contract Orrin Ashford had ever signed with the Vane family on the grounds of fraud, coercion, and unlawful encumbrance. Cassius did not sit. He walked along the table slowly. He read. He read the way a man reads when he is performing the act of reading for an audience. Calmly, with small flickers of polite skepticism on his face. He reached the last document. He read the seal at the bottom, the royal seal, the territorial registry stamp, the lodging time, the lodging date. The smile went away. This filing was lodged this morning. At dawn, Caspian said, without consultation. Without consultation, you are aware that I have certain protections under pack law. As a creditor in good standing. You are not a creditor in good standing, Lord Vane. You are a man who has been extracting wealth from a grieving household by means of a debt that was never owed, against a will that was already invalid on the basis of a death you arranged. Cassius's head came up sharply. That is a serious accusation, Your Grace. It is. It is also written down by the man whose father you killed, on the list in his own hand. 3 days before he died, Cassius's eyes moved to the will. He saw his father's name, Reginald Vane. He saw the word beside it, threatened. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes, in the very deep place where men like him keep the parts of themselves that have never been afraid, moved for the first time. Isolde saw it move. You will leave this house, Lord Vane, she said. My dear, do not call me that, Isolde. You will leave this house. You will go directly to the territorial court at Ironhaven Citadel. You will present yourself to the regional magistrate by the close of the week. You will answer for every document on this table. You will do it because if you do not, the Alpha King will have your name posted on every gate from here to the southern border by the end of the month. And you will not have a single ally left who is willing to take your call. He laughed. This laugh was shorter than the first. You have an interesting sense of the leverage in this room, Isolde A. Ashford. I have an accurate sense of it. I have friends in the Pack Lords' Council. You will not find me as easy to discard as your brother. I am not discarding you. I am inviting you to be tried. There is a difference. The first is private. The second is public. You should choose the first. He stared at her. He had not been spoken to this way in 20 years. It is one of the small mercies of cruelty that the cruel are almost always unprepared for the moment when the people they have hurt stop being afraid. He looked at Caspian. Your Grace, surely a matter of this sensitivity could be resolved without Lord Vane. Yes, I am not the one resolving it. Cassius's jaw set. Then I will speak to her alone. No, Isolde took one step forward, just one. But it was the first step she had ever taken toward him in her life. He flinched. She said, very quietly, there is one more thing, Lord Vane. You are going to want to hear it before you decide what you do next. What? There is a witness. He went still. Who? Henrietta Holloway. His face emptied. It emptied the way a face empties when a man hears, after 20 years, a name he had been certain was dead. That woman is dead, he said. That woman lives in the village at the bottom of this hill. She has lived there for 30 years, under the name Hetty Marlowe. She has known who you are since you were a boy. She watched your father kill her cousin. She has been waiting a very long time to be in the same room with you. She is in this house right now. He took an unsteady step back. His hand reached for the back of a chair. He did not sit. But his hand did not let go of the chair either. "You will have until noon to leave my house," Isolde said. "You will not speak to my mother. You will not speak to my brother. You will not look at me. You will get into your carriage. You will go to Ironhaven. You will not come back." He straightened his coat. He inclined his head. A small, mocking inclination, the bow of a man who has decided to take the public option. "Your Grace," he said to Caspian. He turned. He walked out of the library. His footsteps moved down the central hall. They reached the front door. The door opened. The door closed. A horse stamped on the eastern drive. The carriage rolled away. Isolde did not move until she could no longer hear it. Then she put her hand on the edge of the table and held on. Caspian stepped forward. "Breathe." "I am breathing. You are not," she breathed. It came in shaky. The second breath came in steadier. The third one held. "I want to see Hetty," she said. "She is in the small parlor. Take me to her." He offered his arm. This time she took it. The small parlor smelled like wood smoke and lavender. Hetty Marlowe sat in the high-backed chair by the fire. She looked smaller than Isolde had imagined. She stood up when Isolde came in. She did not say anything at first. She just opened her arms. Isolde walked into them. She had not been held by anyone in 7 years. She did not know, until that moment, what her body had been waiting for. She cried. She cried for the 13-year-old girl who had been moved into the West Wing. She cried for the 14-year-old girl who had stopped expecting visitors. She cried for the 17-year-old girl who had begun, instead of waiting, to read. She cried for her father in the library on a winter afternoon. She cried for her mother in the parlor the night before. She cried for her brother in the back study with a quill and a confession. Hetty did not shush her. Hetty did not soothe her. Hetty just held her. When the crying slowed, Hetty said, "I was your father's friend, you know. He knew who I was. He knew about Caspian's mother. He wrote to me the year you were born. He told me you would be the next one. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I was to keep watch." Isolde pulled back to look at her. "You knew. For 20 years, I knew, and you kept watch as best I could. The letters, the seeds, Wren coming up the back path. It was small. I was a seamstress in a village. I had no army. I had no name. I had a needle and a kitchen and a memory." She squeezed Isolde's hands. "It turned out to be enough," she said. "To keep you alive in here." She tapped her own chest gently. "Until someone could come for the rest of you." Isolde looked at her for a long moment. "You are family," she said. "I am, yes. To Caspian too." "Yes." She turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway. He had not moved. He had let them have the room. His face was very still. His eyes were not. She held out her hand. He came across the room and took it. The three of them sat down by the fire. Nobody spoke for a long time. The afternoon at Ashford Manor was the longest afternoon Isolde had ever lived. Oren signed his statement in the back study at noon. Captain Audra Finn carried it down to Ironhaven Citadel by fast rider the same hour. By 2 o'clock, the regional magistrate had reviewed the filing. By 3, Cassius Vane's carriage had been overtaken on the Eastern Road, and his arrest had been recorded. By 4, the news had By dusk, 3 Alpha Lords of the Eastern Reaches had ridden to Ironhaven to declare their willingness to testify against him. They had been waiting for some time to make it possible. They had been waiting for years. By the next morning, 2 more had arrived from the south. By the end of the week, 11 by the time the trial opened. 12 days later, there were 40 Alpha Lords seated in a half-circle in the great chamber of Ironhaven Citadel, with a long table in the center and a chair in the middle of that table for the woman who was about to speak. Isolde Ashford walked into that chamber alone. She wore the same gray dress she had worn the day Cassius Vane came to the manor. She wore her hair pinned the way Wren had pinned it. She wore no jewelry. She did not look small in the chamber. She did not look afraid. She looked to the 40 men watching her like a woman who had been preparing for this room for 7 years without knowing she was preparing. She stood at the table. She did not sit. And then she spoke. She spoke for 19 minutes. She did not read from a paper. She did not raise her voice. She told them what had happened, plainly, without ornament. She told them about the window, about the 6 clay pots, about the books, about the housemaid who carried letters in fabric scraps, about the seamstress who sent pine needles in an envelope so a girl in a stone room would not forget the smell of trees. She told them about her father, about the second will, about the list of names. She told them about her mother. She told them about her brother. She did not spare anyone in her family. She did not spare herself. And then she said the line that, 2 days later, would be repeated in every village hall and every council chamber in the kingdom. The strongest people I have ever known, she said, are not the people who never fell. They are the people who fell and rose. With their gentleness still intact, the chamber was silent. She called her witnesses. She called her mother. Beatrice Ashford walked to the witness chair like a woman walking into the sea. She gave her testimony. She did not try to soften what she had done. She did not try to soften what had been done to her. When she was done, she did not look at her daughter for forgiveness. She looked at her daughter only to make sure her daughter had heard. She had? She called her brother. Orrin Ashford walked to the witness chair the way a man walks who has finally let go of the thing he had been pretending to be. He gave his statement. He named every document. He named every threat. He named every meeting. When he was done, he turned and looked at his sister for the first time since the night in the library. He nodded once. She nodded back. She called Wren, the housemaid, who told the council about 3 years of smuggled letters. She called the steward of the eastern fields, who confirmed the falsification of the harvest accounts. She called the manor cook, who had once seen Cassius Vane meet with 2 of the late Edmund Ashford's physicians in the kitchen passage 3 weeks before Edmund's death. And then she called Hetty Marlowe. Hetty walked to the witness chair on her own. She was 68 years old. She had walked up and down the hill between her cottage and the manor more times in her life than anyone in the room could count. She gave her name, her full name. The chamber rustled. She gave her testimony. She told them about Caspian's mother, about the cousin who had been buried with no funeral and no name, about the letters Edmund Ashford had written to her in the year before he died, asking her to keep watch. She produced the last letter. She had kept it for 7 years inside the cover of a hymn book on her cottage mantel. She walked the letter across the chamber. She gave it to the chief magistrate. He read it. He read it aloud. It was 3 lines long. If anything happens to me, the man behind it will be Reginald Vane or his son. The price is my daughter. Protect her. If she ever stands in a room and speaks for herself, you will know I did not die for nothing. The chamber was silent for a long time after the magistrate finished reading. Then a man at the far end of the half-circle, an old lord with white hair and a cane, stood up. He did not speak. He simply put his right hand over his heart. The lord beside him stood and did the same. Then the next. Then the next. All 40 alpha lords of the eastern, western, southern, and northern reaches of the kingdom stood and put their hands over their hearts for the daughter of Edmund Ashford. Isolde stood very still in the middle of the chamber. She did not cry. She did not smile. She inclined her head just once. To the lords who had stood, she sat down. The chamber proceeded. Cassius Vane was found guilty on every count. His title was stripped. His lands were forfeited. He was sentenced to permanent exile from Pack territory, to take effect the morning after the ruling, to be enforced by the royal guard. He would not be permitted within 50 miles of any settlement bearing the Holloway, Ashford, or Marlowe names for the remainder of his life. Orrin Ashford was sentenced to 10 years of supervised service at the refugee camps along the southern border where Pack families displaced by Cassius Vane's territorial maneuvering had been living in tents for most of the decade. The sentence was the lightest that could be passed for what he had done. Isolde did not protest it. She did not request a heavier sentence. She did not request a lighter one. She let the court do its work. Beatrice Ashford was not charged. Her cooperation, the court ruled, had been given under sustained coercion. She was permitted to remain at the manor. Isolde was confirmed, formally, as the rightful heir to Ashford Manor. The Ashford provision was proposed 2 months later by her in the same chamber. It was passed unanimously. It made it a crime, anywhere in Pact territory, to list a family member as a dependent in a contract without that family member's named knowledge and signed consent. It made it a crime to hide an adult member of a household from formal Pact society against their will. It made it a crime, finally and for the first time in 3 generations of Pact law, to make a woman invisible because she had become inconvenient. The provision was named, against Isolde's polite objection, the Ashford Law. The first case prosecuted under it, 6 weeks after passage, involved a 15-year-old girl in a small western estate who had been kept in a back room for 3 years. The intervention was led by Isolde's office. The girl walked out of the back room on her own legs. Isolde was there at the door. She did not need to say very much. The girl recognized her without being told who she was. That was the beginning of the rest of Isolde's life. Spring came late that year to Northridge. It came in slow. The snow held on in the hollows of the eastern fields until almost the end of April. The first crocuses pushed up around the lower hedge in pale purple. The river at the bottom of the hill ran high. Caspian came back to Ashford Manor on the first warm day. He came without ceremony. No carriage, no outriders. He rode in alone on a gray mare with the sleeves of his shirt rolled up to the elbow and his coat folded across the saddle in front of him. He had been busy through the winter. The kingdom had needed rebuilding in places that had begun to rot quietly, while Cassius Vane was busy bleeding the eastern estates. They had written almost every week, long letters, slow ones. He had not asked her to wait. She had not asked him to ask. But she had not stopped reading his letters either. And he had not stopped writing them. She was in the garden when he rode up. The lower terrace was a long way from the wild thing it had been the previous October. She had not done the work alone. Wren had helped. Hetty had come up the hill 3 times a week with cuttings from her own garden. Beatrice, slowly, had begun to come out into the sun with her hands in the dirt. The hedges were still uneven. The paths were still not entirely cleared, but the rose beds along the south wall were alive. Half of them were Hetty's cuttings. Half of them were the small, wild roses Isolde had carried down, 1 clay pot at a time, from the 6 pots on the west wing windowsill. She heard the horse before she saw him. She straightened up. She had dirt on her hands. He came up the lower path on foot, leading the mare. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. "You came back," she said finally. "I said I would. You said you would in March. It is May. There was a problem with a council vote in the Western Reaches. There always is. You are not wrong." She laughed. He smiled. "You have dirt on your face," he said. "I do not. You do." She wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. She made it worse there. "Better? Worse. You are not helping. I do not believe I was asked to." She laughed again. She was beginning to expect joy. She did not yet trust the expectation, but she was beginning to allow it. He took a step forward. He stopped. "Isolde, yes. I did not come back to ask you for an answer. I want you to know that. All right. I came back to ask if you are ready for a question. I will not ask it now. I will not ask it this month. I will not ask it this year if you are not ready. I will simply be here." She looked at him for a long moment. She had spent 7 years standing on one side of a closed door. She had spent 7 months learning what life looked like with the door open. She thought about the bench in the lower garden on the night of her first day out, when the first star had come out over the southern hedge. She thought about his hand, warm in hers, as he had pulled her gently to her feet. She thought about her father's last letter. If she ever stands in a room and speaks for herself, you will know I did not die for nothing. She had stood in a room. She had spoken. He had not died for nothing. She had spent 7 years preparing herself to be saved. She had decided, somewhere in the long winter, that she did not want to be saved. She wanted to choose. She had earned the right to choose. She set down the small trowel. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked across the path to him. Caspian. Yes, I have been ready since the night you let me sit on a bench and look at a star. He was very quiet. All right, he said, ask. Now. So he asked. She said yes. He did not pick her up. He did not kiss her in some grand cinematic way. He simply put his hand against her cheek with great gentleness, and he leaned his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long time. The bees moved in the lavender behind them. Up on the hill, the west wing window stood open in the spring sun. The 6 clay pots were gone from the sill. They had been carried down, one by one, to the garden, where their roses had been replanted in the south bed and were already, in the new warmth, beginning to bud. The window was open. The window had been open for 7 months. She had opened it herself, the morning after the trial, with both hands. She had thrown the casement wide. She had stood in the empty room and let the cold winter wind blow across the bare boards. She had not gone back to that room except to clean it. The west wing was being converted that spring into something new. A reading room, mostly, with long shelves, with wide windows, with a door that did not lock. Beatrice watched from the kitchen window. She was crying. This time, she let her daughter see it. Later that evening, at dinner, across the table, without trying to hide it, without trying to perform anything, her daughter saw her. Her daughter, finally, after a long road, reached across the table and put her hand over her mother's. They did not speak. That was the moment Beatrice felt forgiven. Not because Isolde had said the word. Isolde did not say the word for another 2 years, but because in that single touch, the future had been allowed to exist. A future was the only thing Beatrice had ever wanted to give her daughter. She had not been able to. Now her daughter was giving one back, slowly, with her own hand, on her own terms. That was love. Outside, in the garden, the sun was going down. Caspian and Isolde stood beside the south wall, surrounded by small wild roses, and watched the first star rise over the lower hedge. It was the same star. She had told him once, on a bench in October, that it had been her favorite. He had not forgotten. He had ridden for 2 days to be in a garden at the right hour to see it with her. She did not know that yet. He would not tell her until later. For now, they just stood there and watched it rise. And her hand was in his, and the 7 years behind her were not gone exactly, but they had become something else. Not a prison. Not even, really, a wound. Something more like a foundation. The kind of ground a life is built on. Built by her, on her own. And the door, somewhere up on the hill, behind the open window of the west wing, stood open in the wind. It had been open for 7 months. It would never close again.